I'm the coordinator of literacy here in Santa Rosa County, and I work with all things reading. We have done a great job of teaching students to read the words on a page. We truly have. You at any of the school systems, that you go to, we have students that read the words on the page. That's not enough. That's not enough. And so it's, for our own children, it's how do I get them to think about the words on the page? And that's the tough part. That's the, there's not in math, there's a formula or, something we can give them, and there's not that magic formula for reading. We can't see inside the brain. They're doing more research. We do have more research on what happens inside the brain to make those things connect and make those sparks happen, but we still don't have that magic formula. Research does tell us that third grade is an important learning point for students, especially with literacy. Third grade is the time that the transition starts to happen from that reading for enjoyment and pleasure to reading to learn, reading more informational text, reading textbook type material that's not always fun and is often difficult, and it's giving students the stamina to stick with it even when they don't understand it. There is a correlation with third grade reading and high school graduation rates. The connection's made that we've identified for many years now that if a student is struggling and doesn't have foundational skills in place by third grade, they're going to continue to struggle. And we see over and over that once they reach high school and that learning is independent, that they don't have the skills to maintain, and many times, sadly, if we don't intervene, if we haven't caught them by that point, they tend to drop out. We track those students and we try to find out why, what's happening, how do they get lost, and that's what happens. We lose them, and there are so many factors that we can't pinpoint as poverty, situations at home, things that we can't control in the school setting come into play, and sometimes those overshadow when you're struggling at something, you don't enjoy something, you're not good at it, and you've heard that and you've struggled with it over and over and over again. Sometimes it's easier to let those outside forces take over. An indicator that would help us catch students that struggle, there's not one thing. We do have triggers. We do have poverty is something that we look at. We do have identifiers that we start looking very early. Once they enter school, if there's an assessment that we give students as they enter kindergarten so that we can identify, is this a child who's missing some things or that may be behind their age group, and we compare them with their age group and start immediately trying to remediate and build up those skills that are missing, those gaps, and fill those pieces in for them right away. But there's not one trigger. There are so many, and that's what makes it difficult. There's not just one thing that we can point out. We're always looking to see what is it, if we can, what commonalities they have, so that if we can figure out that commonality, then we can offer a solution. I'm very proud of Santa Rosa's movement. We are constantly, it is a never-ending urgency to find as quickly as we can these students that are struggling in every area because they all connect. And we've built a team, and we realize more and more that it takes more than a village. It takes all of us, and we are all very passionate about finding the ways that we can move these students. We're challenged by the state to make them college and career ready. That's our challenge right now in education. And we haven't settled for that. We don't want students that are just college and career ready. We know that it needs to move them beyond that. Once they have that education, life doesn't stop, and the struggles in reading or math or biology, whatever, they don't end there. And so we want to give students not just that ability to read and that ability to do math, but the ability to think through those processes that they can take beyond school, because that's where it has to move. It really has to move them beyond school, beyond that grade, beyond that degree, beyond that point. It's into life, and that's really what our focus has been. Staying involved, knowing what their children are doing in school, starting early and continuing it throughout their career, reading to them, with them, listening to them, having conversations on a daily basis, learning to ask questions that have them think beyond yes and no answers. You know, why things happen, how things happen, explain it to me, those type things. Mentoring is such a vital part of what builds those students that struggle. We are constantly looking for someone within the community, within our school system. We talk all the time about the importance of relationships, because for a lot of those students who struggle, and it's a struggle because of some outside force or those things that we can identify, a lot of times once we connect them with someone that they want to please or that they want to do their best for, and that relationship is built, whether it's someone within the school system or someone within the community or a parent, their achievement levels grow out of wanting to please. That's just a part of our human nature, wanting to be successful and having other people be proud of us and feel like what we do is important to them. So that connection to the community, to other people, and knowing that their parents care and are concerned about what they're doing in reading and writing and how it impacts everything else is invaluable. Research has shown that if we don't have students reading at a proficient level, if we don't have those foundational skills built by third grade, that they're going to struggle for the rest of their career unless something else intervenes. Third grade is seen as the pivot point for most students. It's where the change starts to happen in what they're reading. When you start moving to third, fourth, fifth grade and beyond, they're reading more to learn material. So although they may have built that foundation of reading words, at third grade it begins to that interpretation of those words, what they mean and how to put them together so that it makes sense. So it's that comprehension piece that kicks in. So if they're missing those foundation, if they're not proficient at that point in identifying those words and knowing those basic meanings, then going deeper becomes almost impossible for them. What we've seen is that we have a group of children now that are word callers. They can read the words on the page, and they sound beautiful doing that, but they don't understand what they're doing, and they can't dig deep enough to, when you're reading science text or social studies text, or even math problems, when you get into that type of thinking critically, it becomes difficult for them. They're spending their time still on that word calling stage and trying to understand, break down that meaning, and so they're not able to broaden that picture for themselves. Part of it is that fluidity. When you read for pleasure and you read books that in the third grade they start on chapter books, and you know, that's a big point, a challenge for them. And that type of reading is for pleasure. You're not really having to dig very deeply in that. It's for enjoyment most of the time. You have some people who have that innate ability to pause and think about why the author did that, or why they chose those words, or what's coming next. And for some people that's natural. For children that struggle, that's not, and it's something that has to be taught. So when you compare that to, if you think of a science text or a chart of some type, or reading that we do even as adults, you know, trying to analyze insurance papers, you know, that type of reading is something that you have to do in a different manner. You have to pause and think, a lot of times reread, take notes, look something up, ask someone a question for you to understand and make sense of it. And so yeah, there's a very big difference in those types of reading. Well, it's not just reading for fun. A lot of times if you look at textbooks in kindergarten to third grade, kindergarten to second grade, most of what we used to teach in the past, most of the materials that we've used have been literary, you know, stories of that are fun, Frog and Toad, stories that are enjoyable to read and pleasurable. And we've seen one of the shifts that we're having to do to have students proficient by third grade, which is new for most teachers, is getting into that informational text. We have to start earlier because we haven't typically introduced students to that type of material until they hit fourth and fifth grade. You know, and that's when the science pieces or current events come into play. They aren't using those as much or haven't been, and that's a shift that we're seeing now in our curriculums, that we are pulling in that informational text at a much earlier age and introducing that so we can build background so that when they do see it in print, they have that background knowledge and they're able to make sense of it better. We don't want to get rid of bedtime stories. Reading to children has always been the most important thing a parent can do. And it's also the conversation that happens after and during that reading too. So one of the things that we're going to be stressing a lot this year is the types of questions. As a parent, when you read, you don't want to get rid of that lap time, which is one of the greatest indicators of success for students later on, is the amount of time that they spend next to someone with a book, or a Kindle or whatever device that we're using nowadays. But that's never going to go away as being something that's important. But what we want to help parents focus on is, are there questions that I can ask my child now before they start school that'll help them develop those kind of critical thinking patterns? And there absolutely are. And it's conversation, it's that speaking and listening. Until a child, research has told us, until a child can speak those words and those meanings, they'll never be able, the brain won't process it in print. So that conversation is the most important thing that a parent can do right now. I don't think that it's changed what parents need to do. I think what we've done, and I'm a grandparent, and it's what I do with my grandchild. I still love to read for fun and find books that he enjoys and that he's interested in. But I think it's being aware that I need to pull in some of those informational pieces as well. If I read a story about dinosaurs, something that's cute and funny and we laugh, I also need to pull in an article to show him some facts and some figures and how he can learn more. And I think that's the next step, that we show children that while reading's fun and enjoyable and it's something that's a pleasure for a lifetime for you, it's also the way you learn anything that you want to learn. We've seen VPK as a very beneficial aid in helping students become proficient by third grade, because it's that extra boost for some kids. It's that introduction early in a school setting to that informational type text, to building that background, to seeing those skills, to helping them move forward in their learning, so that when they have that background in place that evens the playing field, so that it takes away those outside influences, then we see that we have students normally catch up, even if they've come from poverty situations or they haven't had that parent time, that lap time with a book. A school setting can help build that, so that by the time they're at third grade, if there's not a learning disability, we typically catch that. And so those students become proficient and they catch up to the peer group that had that lap time and all of that. So VPK gives them that extra boost, that especially those students who don't have it at home. Kids need to be well-rounded. We want them to have sports and music, but when you look at all those venues, parents, the community is so much more involved, and schools work on activity. How can we make this fun? How can we get the parents in here and let's feed them, and let's have, we have a middle school near here, King Middle School, they've built a garden outside that's open to the community, that's Wi-Fi access, that people can come within the community and sit and read, and trying to make that an event type thing. And it's sad for us to watch that it's not an event, it's an expectation, I think, in our society now, that parents expect. I expected to send my children to school, they get an education, you take care of that part, and I take care of the rest. And if we could turn those tables just a little bit to focus on, you said, cheering them on. And most parents feel that they do. I felt that I did with mine, good job, I'm so proud of you, but not to the extent that we do with their other outside activities. And you're right, not the time that it really needs to.